Things that I didn't have as a kid growing up that are commonplace now. Let's talk about that.
Man Up with Mark. Mark talks about everything under the sun. You may agree with him, and again, you may not.
I was talking to a friend the other day. That's from a television series. It's actually from a streaming series. Hint, it's about a Canadian town.
You got a bit banged up after work the other day.
Can you guess what it was? I digress from my subject. At any rate, I was talking the other day with some people, and we were talking about things that are commonplace now that we didn't have as kids. Some of the items we didn't have until we were young adults. That our kids, now grown up to be adults, have always had. They've never known any different. So, let's go through a few items. Well, okay, I have 6 items to be exact.
Exactly, 99.78% to be exact.
The first item, the microwave oven.
What is that?
Never had a microwave oven when I was growing up as a kid. I don't think I ever saw a microwave oven until I think I was graduated high school. Tried going into college was the first time I ever saw a microwave. And they were pretty archaic at that time. The microwave oven itself, hell, it was invented back in the 40s, 1940. I think it was 1945 to be exact.
Exactly.
I think Raytheon was the company that invented it. Yeah, Raytheon, the military complex, industrial military complex type of company. They invented the microwave oven. It was called the radar range.
Radar?
It just sounded scary back then. In fact, the early models of the microwave were kind of dangerous. Hell, if you had a pacemaker inside your heart and you stood in front of the newly invented microwave, it would fucking kill you. The shit it emitted would screw up the pacemaker, and you'd fall flat on your face if you were standing in front of that thing when you turned it on. Now, they did conquer that issue later on. I think mainly the microwave oven became popular in the 70s. I graduated high school in 74, so it was basically just coming out then. Nowadays, you know, my kids, their kids, hell, the microwave's been around forever. There's never been a time without a microwave.
I love the feel of toasty socks out of the microwave.
I remember my mom having to cook in the oven, on the stovetop, boiling water in a pan. Yeah, it didn't happen in a microwave back then. Number 2, the cell phone. The smartphone. Yeah, let's get specific. The smartphone. My kids, when they were growing up, they didn't have a cell phone. Although cell phones were around, they didn't have one. They had pagers. When we wanted to get a hold of the kids, the wife and I paged them. Cell phones weren't that, widely used for kids anyways. I think the first cell phone was invented in 1973. I was a junior in high school. So I certainly didn't have a cell phone. I remember by the early 80s, though, by, 83, 84, I think it was 84, when Motorola came out with what we nicknamed as the Brick. It was a cell phone that was so big and so thick, and it felt like you were holding a brick. But it was a cell phone. You could make calls and receive calls. That's all you could do. By the 90s, the cell phones became what's known as smartphones. They could do more than just receive and send calls. They could tell you the time. They might be able to take a picture. There were just certain functions on it that were more than just a phone, so they were technically called a smartphone. The true smartphones came out when Apple came out with their iPhone.
I want an iPhone, an iPad, and an iTouch.
Now that was the origin or the beginning of the true flat-looking type smartphones that you see nowadays. That happened in 2007. So, not too long ago. But my kids, their children,
Are we talking about your grandchildren?
they've never known any different. There's always been smartphones around. And as far as my kids, when they were young, they had the pagers, but not too long after that, they all got cell phones. I would say they were, late grade school, early junior high when they got their cell phones. And they've been with one ever since. Myself, going through school, through grade school, through junior high, through high school, hell, even after high school, I never had a cell phone of any type, whether it be the brick or the smartphone. So, yeah, it's kind of a funny thing to...
It's not that funny.
...talk about cell phones, and someone will say, well, hell, cell phones been around since dirt. No, not actually. The next item. This is a good one.
How good is it?
The copier. The duplicating machine. Yeah. Wasn't around when I was a kid. Hell, I remember in grade school, and I remember in Catholic grade school. Yeah. I remember the nuns doing the mimeograph machine. Cha-chunk, 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 cha-chunk. If they had to make multiple copies of something. Yeah, you smelled that ammonia smell and all of that fun stuff. Yeah, that takes me back. I digress. The copier, was basically invented in the late 50s, 1959. 1958 or 1959, somewhere around there. It didn't become popular, or it didn't start getting widely used in, offices or schools or, places of business, anything like that. That didn't happen until the mid-60s. That's when you started seeing them in different places. And that duplicating machine that you saw in businesses and schools was probably the Xerox 914. And that's where the copying machine or the duplicating machine got their common use name. Doing a Xerox. I need a Xerox. Hey, do some Xeroxes here. Hey, go to the Xerox machine.
It looks like a Xerox of a Xerox.
There were many companies after the 60s that started making duplicating machines or copiers, but everybody called them a Xerox. And Xerox was actually the brand name of the copier that came out in the early 60s. How about that? Along with the copier, we had the fax machine that came out.
Yeah, just a fax.
Yeah, the fax machine. The facsimile machine, as it's properly called. Gonna send a fax. That was used big time. Started being used big time in the 80s. I think the process of the fax machine was invented back in the 1800s, like 1843, but it never really got used, or it never was modernized or usable until like the 1960s. I think it was 1963 when it finally came out into the public. And guess who made it? Xerox. Yeah, sure. They were all into that. Now, the funny thing about what I've mentioned so far about the microwave and the copier and the cell phone, the fax machine is probably going to be a dinosaur here by next year, by 2025. So little people use it now, mainly because, the computer and the internet took over. There's really no need for it. It was used mainly for documents that needed to be signed, and you could sign the document and fax it to the other location where it needed to go. And it was also used for other types of communication that are easily used now by computers. And because of the internet, lo and behold, voila, super fast. So yeah, the fax machine, they are being used still, but very sparsely, hardly used at all. And experts say,
but who's an expert?
Whoever the experts are, they say that, by 2025, they'll be gone. Now, speaking of computers and the internet, computers weren't around when I was growing up as a kid. No. Computers have been around, ever since my kids were growing up, ever since their kids have been growing up. So they've, again, known no different. There's always been a computer in the house.
You have a computer?
Not when I was growing up. In fact, when I was growing up, went through high school, graduated high school, moved out and tried to go to college. My parents never had a personal computer. In fact, the personal computer was not really invented until the 1950s. I use that term loosely, the personal computer, because it was archaic. It was not necessarily the most convenient thing to try to put somewhere in your house. It was like the computers of the 50s and 60s that you saw on TV, during the space race and during any type of program. You would see a computer room, and it took up a huge room. The personal computer that was invented back in the 50s was the same. It was a big monster. It never really got refined until about the mid-70s.
Oh, groovy, baby. Yeah.
By the mid-70s, it was reduced down into a smaller size that could fit on a desktop. And I believe that computer was called the Altair 8800, something like that. For all intents purposes, the true personal computers didn't start coming out until 1981, 82. That's when they were small enough and usable to the point where a lot of people in households would start using personal computers. You could play games on them by then. Yeah, that was a great use of technology, something to play games on. I remember getting my first personal computer, and it was around 1982, 1983. Yeah, I was on the cutting edge. Yeah, I was a married guy. I was doing some sideline artwork, a little side gig from my normal job. And I was creating logos for different companies that would hire me. And I used the computer at the time to do basic designs and to do layouts and try to figure out how a certain logo would look. And I would type out the name of the company and its trade name and its slogan, and type it all out through the personal computer and print it out through the printer. And at that time, the quality that was coming out was not that great. The pixel rate was pretty poor.
So long, dot matrix printer. Hello, bubble jet.
I think at the time, my personal computer had a 20 meg hard drive. Yeah, I think it was 20 meg. It might have been even less. Nowadays, you've got gigabytes and terabytes and, whatever kind of bytes. They're beyond belief how much memory a computer can store now. Back then, not too much. And you had to put things on floppy disks. Oh, yeah.
This is what you call a floppy disk?
The floppy disk. Yeah, that went with the personal computer. Yeah, you had the big floppy disks. And then you got to the small mini floppy disks. Yeah, that was cool back then. I don't think they use floppy disks anymore. No, everything's put on thumb drives or on external hard drives or things like that. And all the programs that we had to run from floppy disks are now all online subscriptions. Yeah, pretty wild. Now the next item will probably surprise you. The automobile seatbelt. Yeah, that wasn't around when I was a kid. No. My mom and dad, they had a 1967, 68 Chevrolet Impala. Didn't have seatbelts in it. My dad's FBI, the Bureau car, was a 1958, I think, 1958 or 1959, Buick. It had no seatbelts. The seatbelt actually wasn't invented until the 1950s. Yeah, in fact, I think it was late 1950s, 1959. Yeah, I think that's when it was. And they weren't required to be installed in automobiles until, I believe, 1968 or 1969, like 9 or 10 years later. That's when the automobile industry decided that, yeah, we're going to install them in every vehicle. In fact, it didn't become law to wear them until the mid-'80s to the mid-'90s, depending on what state you were in. Each state enacted that law a different year. It started from, 1985 to 1995. So, again, my kids and their kids...
Are we talking about your grandchildren?
They've always had seatbelts. They've always had to wear seatbelts. Me? Nope. I grew up in automobiles that didn't have seatbelts, or if they had seatbelts, we didn't wear them. We had the old thing that when mom or dad hit the brakes real hard, they'd put their arm across the seat if you were sitting in the front seat to hold you. Yeah. If you were in the back seat, screw it. You're coming into the front seat no matter what. That was always fun. So yeah, seatbelts. That was crazy to just kind of look back at that and see when they came about and when legally they had to be worn. That surprised me. And last but not least, the pop-top can. Now that's important stuff, huh? Yeah. Whether it was a can of soda, a can of beer, a can of fuzzy drinking water, whatever was in the can, when I was growing up, you had to use the old church key, pop that sucker open with the old can opener. The pop-top wasn't invented until 1963, and it wasn't installed or applied to drinking cans until about 1965, 1966. I was already 10 years old by then, so, hell, I thought that when I saw the first pop-top can, that was like, oh my God, did aliens invent this? I think somebody came down from a UFO and told us how to put these on cans.
You're crazy.
It was remarkable.
You're too easily impressed.
By that time, by the mid-60s, 75% or so of cans of drinking liquids, such as sodas and beers and water and whatever, had the pop-top cans. Only 75%. Surprising. It took a little while longer before everybody in the world started using them. I know this is a silly subject. It just kind of caught me as an interesting item, the pop-top can. There you go. Those are the items. Items that I didn't have as a kid growing up until later in life, that my kids and their kids,
Are we talking about your grandchildren?
have always known. Now, I can talk about other things too, but, it would go too long. This podcast would go too long. Hell, we could talk about the internet. Yeah, that's something that my kids' kids
Are we talking about your grandchildren?
have always thought existed. But at any rate, I just thought that this topic would be silly, funny. There might be items out there that you guys might think about that weren't out there yet when you were a kid, that are commonplace now. Let me know. Send a comment. Also, please like, subscribe, and ring that bell. And, like always, I'll keep begging. Yeah, why not? Please donate to my Patreon page. That's patreon.com/manupwithmark. Every little bit will help this silly-ass podcast keep going. And like always, you can always email me at mark@manupwithmark.com. Okay. Silly subject closed. See ya.
If you have a question or comment, email Mark at manupwithmark.com.